can someone benefit from that experience?
Well, some philosophers would say such a thing is impossible. There aren't unspeakable realities. Somebody else would say, well, it's this or it's that. So it sheds light on certain questions of philosophy and heuristics and all that, that seems to me that it gives real answers. I mean, maybe you don't believe these answers, but I know a convincing argument when I see it. And if anybody with argument could do to you what DMT does to you, you'd embrace it in a hurry.
What about ayahuasca? I mean, what do you think are the main benefits from people taking that in a ritualistic sort of context?
Well, we're long away from ritual. And I think rituals are what we need. That's why we create sports leagues and beauty pageants and all these things, simply to reassure ourselves that in these ritual confined spaces, these energies can be held. And it's the part we are most distant from.
And do you think you need a shaman to take you on those rituals, or is the plant itself enough?
No, the plant is more impressive. If it were a shaman, people would say, well, it's show business. I mean, I saw a guy cut a woman in half on stage once, or I saw this, or I saw that. But I think the fact that, in the case of DMT, a match head-sized piece of orange wax can pull your entire philosophical world out from under you in about 15 seconds is very, very interesting. I mean, how long did it take you to learn to talk? 2 years or a year and a half? How long does it take you to DMT? Oh, about 30 seconds, So it's very interesting. We've created enough alienation that it seems as though we are going to explore the uses of these shamanic technologies. So the high-tech culture, the scientific and materialist culture, seems to have made a choice to explore these things, and the shamanic Aboriginal culture seems to have made its choice. But it's going to integrate while we're going to have another one of these socially destructive debates about law and order and obligation and all the rest of it. That seems to me to be a waste of time.
What do you think ayahuasca has to offer humanity at this point in time that changes the millennium?
Well, all boundaries are dissolving. That's what the end of the millennium means. It means that, the tribes of the Amazon basin, the tribes of the New Guinea highlands, the tribes of Oxford and Cambridge, everything is dissolving, and humanity is reaching a kind of plural consensus. I mean, even the most sophisticated capitalist, let us say, is aware now that it won't do to cut down all the trees, that that's a mistake. So what's happening is a single human viewpoint is sort of coming into existence, a viewpoint that values nature, values natural resources, and tries to, however clumsily, to make some kind of peace out of the whole human mess that we're now mixed up in. I think what it brings is an empathy to the destruction of the planet. The cutting of a rainforest is suddenly no longer completely abstract. It's actually something you can feel and relate to. And all political change begins with a change of feeling and value. So, if we begin to see the Aboriginal people of every continent as the holders of this knowledge, they will begin to look not so naive, not so foolish or something like that, but actually as sophisticated people who have developed a working relationship with these powers and things. And that's the only way you're going to get real political change on some of these issues. If we were having this discussion 30 years ago, we would not be talking about ayahuasca, we'd be talking about mushrooms and their potential and the, you know. So I think the plants change, the drugs change, but the challenge stays the same, and the challenge is to build a humane and human world without doing damage to the humanity that's already in it.
So, what's your view for the future? You know, do you feel confident or pessimistic, optimistic that humanity can take on this challenge?
It requires dedication and intelligence, not so much among our shaman and our inner voyagers, but among the legislators and the people who actually are going to have to make the social change. That's why what goes on in the Netherlands is so important. You know, these are the most liberal people in the world. Well, are they liberal enough to actually change the basic structure of their society? I mean, talk is easy, but can they actually make the change? What they're trying to do is establish the notion of a thought crime. You know, that it's a crime to consider restructuring the state this way or this way. And that will, you know, if we have not learned anything from the 20th century, we should have learned that wars of ideology are hopeless and just bring incredible grief and loss of life. So I'm hoping that what the 21st century can mean is movement beyond ideology and an actual rational, and I think it is rational approach to integrating the irrational into how we think about society, city planning, social management, and all the rest of it.
So what were you saying about the patenting of ayahuasca?
Well, some years ago, a dozen years ago or more, a fellow patented ayahuasca. Somehow this happened. It's not supposed to be possible with plants. And then a group of several South American tribes put a lawsuit on him. And it took a lot of money and years to work this to the Supreme Court. And about 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court ruled that you can't patent a plant, that a plant is not an invention. It's not made by human genius. It is a product of nature. So no plants can be patented, and that patent was declared void. So that's a good thing. There is a thing called the UN Convention on Narcotics, which was something that when the US and NATO and all that completely controlled the UN, they produced this document, which if you signed it, you were basically joining this club which said you would commit resources, time, manpower to eradicating all these drugs. And that was pretty much done through the late 50s and then on into the 60s. And then, of course, LSD was very threatening because you can get, 100,000 hits under one postage stamp. Well, for somebody who's trying to control something that they look upon like nerve gas or something, a weapon, quote, weapon, with that kind of a description makes people very nervous indeed. And so it came out of that.
So why do you think psychedelics are so threatening to these establishments?
Because they produce unexpected ideas and conclusions. That's what strange politics does. You know, you go in a Freemason and a Republican, and you come out, God knows what, a polyamorist and an anarchist or something like that.
You talk about the dominated culture in your books. What do you think that has any reasons why these plants have been made illegal?
Yeah, because they nibble away at the edges of orthodoxy. I mean, once you get the idea that a mushroom can talk to you in your native language and propose various things, life never looks quite the same again, you know. I mean, in a sense, you could say civilization was the journey from fairyland to scientific materialism. Well, then there you are. You think you've conquered scientific materialism, but here's a mushroom, here's a vine, here's a morning glory, and they all give you a message back that is just so peculiar, you don't know what to do with it. Well, there's a lot of evidence and discussion about whether or not it gives you telepathic powers or science fiction-like powers. This could be. I mean, two brains 6 feet apart are both biochemical oscillators. It would not, I wouldn't consider it a miracle if it were found that brains floating in ayahuasca have a kind of supernatural connection. And if the tendencies of past history are to continue, that's what it would have to be. That we're on the brink of designing drugs, of moving our technological design process to a point where we can actually design drugs that extract power from them that we never had or dreamed of before. And that would carry us well beyond the Industrial Revolution. I mean, that would be the new world.
And just again, briefly, your recent journey, facing whatever it is that you've faced, death, whatever. I mean, has there been any revelations for you about your journey, about death, about where you're going?
You mean you're referring to the fact that I have glioblastoma multiforme, which is a form of brain cancer? Well, I wish I could say I'd had more insight into death. I've had a fair amount of insight into dying, which I find a very alarming prospect. Death itself is so far beyond ordinary experience. The threat of dying doesn't really move you toward understanding it. Death is the great mystery around which religions are built, and being able to say, I know what it is, I know how it works, is the way you start a congregation and get a little community going. I would say the big surprise for me was I'm not afraid of death the way I thought I would be. It's just such an intellectual question mark that you just move to the next page because there's nothing to be said about death except that it seems to last rather a long time.
If you have one thing that you wanted to say to people from all your learnings that you've had, through your life, what would that one message be to someone?
That following your own curiosity is a better method for exploring the world than any of the methods offered. Sheer curiosity is the thing that I've always let carry me along, and I have no regrets about any of this. I think it's worth the life to put these issues in front of people.